All right, thanks everybody for coming out. My name is Nolan. Below me on my screen is Bill. He and I and a gentleman named Rob, who is hiding today, run this. It's the SAC Interactive User Group. We meet right here on Zoom every third Wednesday of the month. It's always free. It's always talking about something to do with web or mobile development, although the actual technology changes from month to month. We're always looking for people who want to present, and we're looking for people who have ideas on presentations we could do. So if you would like to present to the group, if you have suggestions on talks we can do in the future, please let Bill or myself know. We're going to be recording this and putting it on our YouTube channel later on. If you are not yet on our mailing list and would like to be, please use the chat feature in here and send either myself or Bill your email address, and we'll add you to the list to take care of that. And today our guest speaker is Mark Takata from Adobe. He is the ColdFusion technical evangelist, and just dropped into that role, what, about a month ago now, Mark? 2 months ago, somewhere in that ballpark? Three months ago now already. Wow, time flies. All right. So Mark is here, and he's going to chat with us about ColdFusion and the future of the language and the platform with whatever Adobe plans to be doing with it. I think that's all of our preamble, meeting, prep stuff that we have to take care of. Mark, it's all yours. Take it away. Let's talk about Adobe and ColdFusion.
All right. So for those that aren't familiar with me, like Nolan said, Mark Takata. I've been a ColdFusion developer for like 20-something years, been doing it for a long time. I also know a bunch of other languages, C#, JS, Python, VB. And I was brought on this role about 3 months ago to try and replace the evangelist that had been there for 8 years, Alicia Zorak, who was more on the, had a background in marketing and in support, and had become technical later on, but they were looking for someone like hyper technical to bring into this role so that I could have a little bit more of a rapport with the developers. And so here I am after a month of interviewing with them. And my role is a little bit different than Alicia's. She was much more on the technical sales rep side. They would bring her into sales and have her sell the product, essentially. That's not really what I do. I'm much more on the DevRel and evangelism side. I do love the idea behind this. And also bring the people who maybe don't currently love it, bring their issues, bugs, difficulties to the team in a more direct manner than is allowable by the various ways that people use, email, Slack, and I'm in the Slack, I'm in the Facebook places. I'm basically in the places where ColdFusion developers hang out and hang out by the water cooler and complain about I'm having a problem with whatever, and then I go, really? Tell me more. Let's see. Maybe we can get you going. And that's kind of what I'm there. I'm like a conversation starter, but I don't actually fix the stuff, which is a great way to have a job. If you can get a job where you don't have to like fix the thing, you can send it to somebody and then they fix it. So that's what I do. I guess tonight we're just going to talk about some of the plans that we have for ColdFusion and maybe some of the lack of plans that we're hoping to fill in over the next few months. So I can talk a little bit about all those things. Did you have questions and agenda items at all, Nolan, or you're just gonna let me blather on for an hour?
I did not have agenda items. I figured I'd see what I'd let you start and see how you direct things, and we'll go from there and see what happens. Yeah. And Sean's here, and Sean's always good for a witty comment or two about CFML. So we'll see what happens.
All right, I'll be ready. Well, let's talk about where ColdFusion is right now, because I know this is currently, there's a lot of buzz in the community about, like, there's a lot of what happened type of things going around. We announced not too long ago that we were moving the JDK off of Oracle and going to something called Zool. And the reasonings behind that were not ColdFusion specific at all. They were Adobe, like the entirety of Adobe, and had very much to do with stuff that none of us want to talk about, like licensing, money, big horn sheep up here, in the C-suite kind of butting heads. And unfortunately, at the time, we determined that Oracle was just not going to be a great continuing partner. And we've, of course, as we all know, like Oracle has been somewhat difficult, not just with Adobe. I mean, I work with UC Davis, and goodness, not fun, right? Like they're not fun to work with necessarily anyway. And so we decided we were going to move towards Azure. And so for the past 2 months, maybe a little bit more even, our team has just been, like hammering on getting the Azure move in. Because although it's a JDK, obviously it should be like, oh, it's a JDK, it's the same thing, right? You plug one in, plug the other one in. They're different, and they're different enough to where you need a ton of testing. And so we did a bunch of testing, and something came up very, very late in the game, literally a week ago, maybe, something like that. I'm not really sure. As Nolan said, time passes oddly in this world. And essentially, while I can't actually share the exact reason why this fell apart, it has to do with security, and it has to do with federal customers of Adobe products in general. This is not a ColdFusion thing. We are just victims of the of this issue that came up, and we tried exceedingly hard to make a go at it with Azure. I mean, I was part of many meetings with a lot of people that were trying very hard, and in the end, they made the very, very difficult decision that we were going to actually back out all the work that we'd done across the entire company, and especially in the ColdFusion team, and we were going to continue on as we had been with Oracle. So that's the messaging that came out yesterday, and it's the way it was written is not very clear, and so let me help maybe clarify some of it. So what the messaging said was we would give you more info in December of 2021, and people were interpreting that as we will move to Azure in December of 2021. That is incorrect. It literally means we will find out more in 2021, but almost certainly, unless there's some kind of miracle, we will not be going to Azure throughout the stack across Adobe, including ColdFusion. Now, what might happen, possibility, we may support 2 JDKs. It's possible. For now, don't expect that. The expectation from the engineering team and everyone at the stack is that the next installers you see will be Oracle-based. And I know the next question is 11? Right? The new JDK, is it there? And I honestly don't have the answer to that. We are literally in flight right now trying to get these installers out. And I know that the new Oracle installers came out, and while it would seem likely that we'd have an inside edge on when these things come out and we'd get early testing and all that, again, Oracle can be a little bit not great to work with, so we don't really have those in our hands. So, we're already beyond when we wanted to launch this for everybody. We wanted to have this in your hands last week, actually, and we didn't. So currently, I believe the last numbers I heard was, I think, late August, early September, maybe. And don't quote me on that. I'm being recorded, but that's where we're looking at doing, because we have to go back and redo that entire. We spent 2 months just hammering on Azure, totally ignoring Oracle, because for us, Oracle is the past. We weren't worried about it. Now, all of those bug fixes, all the security stuff that we fixed, everything has to be regression tested back against Oracle again, and potentially a new Oracle. So that adds yet another moving part into the whole thing. So that's where we are today. And this has the unfortunate, very unfortunate side effect of moving all the fun stuff out too, like Lambdas. Everybody's like, we want lambdas, right? Not llamas. I mean, I want llamas, but that's it. And those unfortunately have to also focus and are based on the installers as well, because those installers, like, they kind of talk to each other, and we're trying to figure out also how all of that's going to exactly work. We had some pre-release stuff and it worked pretty well. There were some issues. We fixed those issues. We were pretty ready to go, actually. We had it running on Azure. And then, yeah, all this happened. So that's where we're at right now. And moving forward, I think we're just going to have to watch and see if no problems come up. The hope is we can get installers out, we can get downloads out. Also, very important, I have made the plea at my loudest unfireable volume to separate any security updates from functional and bug fix in the next release. So, doing the work. So trying to make sure that those are separated, because there were some security issues that came up that are being fixed. And I am very, very loudly trying to make sure that the community is heard on this point. And I want to make that clear, because the last big update, we had just a whole bunch of badness that came out. Like, there was the bug fix that messed up a lot of people's code, because people were using, they were sort of hacking, it's the wrong word, but they were being a little free with their programming code, and that ended up making it so that when we fixed that issue, their code stopped working. It was a CF SQL param that was allowing you to use, I think I want to say it was a type of string or a varchar, and you could name it something else and it would still work. And we fixed that, right? And it broke a lot of things, but unfortunately, because you could either install the whole thing and get security, or not install it and then have your code still work but be unsecure, you can see that was a really bad situation. So I don't want that to occur again. And so I'm asking them to separate that out. So I should know by next Tuesday. So you guys can yell at me on Slack next Tuesday. What happened? Did you get an answer? But yeah, I'll be chatting with all the lead engineers on that. So that's ColdFusion today. Does anyone have any questions on any particulars that they're looking for, or anything that's come up online? Or
can you talk a little bit about, I'm not familiar enough with Azure, and I know Oracle is, database, but can you talk a little bit about what the differences are between those two platforms and why it's one or the other, or what
totally.
Mitigating factors were for deciding about one or the other?
Sure. So Oracle is a paid product, right? So they license their JDKs, and it's not a database. So it's a Java development toolkit. Basically, it's kind of the engine that underlies, like it's the underlying stuff. And the difference between the two is Azure is open source. It's a fully open JDK. I think there's actually an open JDK standard that it runs on, which there's several of those out there. I think Command Box runs on one of them, and then there's the Azure. And so to use Oracle, you pay them a licensing fee to use the product, and you get support alongside it, right? Which is one of the reasons that ColdFusion isn't necessarily free. Oh, hi, Dinesh. But also it provides us support. It allows us, like, if there's some low-level problem, we can fix it. They send us updates that are security-driven, et cetera, et cetera. So you have Azure, which is open source. So they are a company that develops this, and you can use it for free. The JDK is open source. I mean, right, free like beer, right? So it's open source, but they do have you pay for support. And we did buy a contract with them for support, so that if anything went wrong, obviously. So it was like, I don't know, 24 of one, dozen times two of the other. It was kind of the same thing. We just wanted to remove ourselves from the kind of semi-toxic Oracle update chaos that often seems to happen in their databases and their JDKs. Was Azul going to be better? Probably, not guaranteed that it'd be better, but they have a little bit better of a reputation for getting stuff out a little bit early. You probably would have seen things like us getting these updates prior to public releases and having them tested, and so we could co-release at the same time. That probably would have happened more often with Azul. So I think they had a little bit of a performance improvement, possibly in some things.
Azul has done a lot of work on JDK performance in the past. I know that they have they're sort of based now on the standard OpenJDK, but back in the day, the Azul JVM was always very fast, and they did a lot of leading edge stuff around that. The other thing that's kind of nice with Azul is that they provide bundles of the JDK with JavaFX. So if you're building GUIs with Java or Java technology, you can get JavaFX bundled directly in with that. Oracle have it bundled into the Java 8 and subsequent ones, but you can't get OpenJDK 8. You can't get a JavaFX for OpenJDK 8. For companies that are still kind of stuck on Java 8, they have to be on Oracle to get JavaFX, or Azul, because Azul actually do have a supported Java 8 with JavaFX. So, in the Java world, these things are kind of much, much more important. In the ColdFusion world, it's less important because it's really just the engine that ColdFusion runs on.
Right.
But the issue of, as a company, Adobe sells a supported product, and to have a commercial support contract for the underlying technology is kind of important.
Critical, I would
if
say.
you are running on the OpenJDK, which a lot of people out there running Java technology run on OpenJDK, but you are then kind of at the mercy of whichever open source organization you're working with. We personally run Adopt OpenJDK, which has moved now to the Eclipse Foundation. I found that out just the other day, that they moved to the Eclipse Foundation in March when I went looking. And so you still get fairly regular updates of the JVM on all of the supported versions, but you're getting them off the OpenJDK base, not off the Oracle stream of bug fixes and security issues. So, and the other thing is that Oracle provide a whole bunch of proprietary tooling around the JVM, which
again, we don't really hook into those.
But people still could use those tools to do analysis on ColdFusion performance issues and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange world, and Oracle have chosen to change how they release Java. They sort of went from this big release every however many years to a situation where now they release a new version every 6 months, but they immediately stop supporting the previous version when they release the new one, except for big landmarks, which it looked like it would be 8, 11, 14, but then 14 wasn't a long-term support, and so it's now 17. And so for anyone who's dependent on commercial support, they essentially have to go from JDK 11 to JDK 17, which is in early access right now.
Yeah, it's one of the, like we were saying, it's unfortunate that we have to be kind of beholden to that, but it's something that a lot of people don't really understand who are users of ColdFusion.
Right.
That there's an engine running under this, right? And we don't necessarily have all the keys to that particular. We have a lot of them, and our engineers are Java experts, obviously, but Yeah, it would have been. I actually am a little sad. I kind of wanted to see how the experiment with Azul would have gone. I actually was looking forward to that. I thought it might have been kind of a new dawn, to be extra dramatic. But it is what it is. I mean, it's been very clearly stated that it's not gonna work for a majority of Adobe products. They're just not going to be moved. Now, we did sign the contract with Azul, so we're staying with that. We're not backing out of that. So some Adobe products will run on Azul, which is why there's the potential down the road, if someone wanted to run on Azul, we may make that a supported type of use, possibly. It's still being discussed because obviously it adds a significant amount of regression testing to any new versions. Any bug fixes have to be fixed against both of them because you can't just assume the two are identical because they're not. But on the other hand, we do have quite a bit of interest in people who don't want to use Oracle in their environments, who want to use open source types of things. And a lot of people do already, using like command box and things like that, where they're pulling into different things and using. I actually know there's a whole company that somehow just rips out the JDK, and they're on one of the open JDK sources, and they kind of do their own support because they have their own developers who are good at that. And I was like cringing a little bit, like, oh, okay, that seems interesting, but they refuse to have Oracle in their environment for reasons. I don't know. Or probably don't want to because very unhappy reasons. But they do fine.
Yeah.
And they don't ask for for the support questions they ask us have nothing to do with that layer. They got that figured out. So hopefully that answers your question, Bill. Did anybody else have anything about where we are today?
Not about that. This might be a today or it might be in the future thing. I'm not really sure. The ColdFusion certifications. You and I worked on. Well, I wrote the test that they administered, I guess, 2 years ago now at the ColdFusion Summit. That one. And then you and I met in Napa with Lishan Kishore and Dave and rewrote the whole batch of new questions for it. What is the status of the ColdFusion certification program currently for people?
So you're right. That's both today and tomorrow.
Okay.
So today, that certification program is live. And
the one from 2 years ago, or the one that we wrote in Napa?
The one that we wrote. Now, let me clarify. The one that you and I and Dave Ferguson and Alicia and the team wrote in Napa, which is, they have a name for it. It's the Adobe Certified Professional in Adobe ColdFusion.
Okay.
The longest certification name ever. So that one is live. It's available today. You can go and sign up for it. We've dropped the price precipitously, like it used to be $400 or something. It's $150, which I think barely covers what we pay as Adobe to have the certs go through, like LinkedIn and all that. We use a third-party company, so we're not making any money on that. We're trying to get as many people taking it, and it is pretty awesome and a pretty hard test. Like that, I've gotten feedback from people who've taken it who were like, "Whoa, I thought I was pretty good at ColdFusion, and this kind of woke me up that there's gaps in knowledge." And it's primarily from people who are longtime developers who maybe have not updated all the skills to modern methodologies. We were very much in the test. We focused very much on programming in a modern way, on purpose, of course. We would like people to do that way. But if you're part of a company, if you're part of a big company, and you are a ColdFusion licensee, and you're interested in having your developers get certified, please reach out to me. I can help. Wait.
Does the current certification program include the training videos that were put together a couple years ago too, or have those been moved somewhere else as well?
So, I think it includes those plus more because there were other things that were added. So what was quoted to me is there's 13 hours or something like that of video that this comes with, which I believe yours was like 10.
That sounds about right. 10 or somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah.
So they've added a couple of hours of video, which is a lot of video, and it's a lot of video for $150. So I'm actually I suggest to people who are interested in just upgrading their knowledge, or people who are new who want to learn, that for $150, I mean, you can go out and just get a really great underlying base, right? And then I know you have another maybe higher level course that I think it's on Ortus.
Oh yes, I wrote 2 video series for Ortus it's on their site cfcasts.com. I did one that is an intro to the Coldbox system itself specifically. So that one kind of assumes people have already got a pretty decent fundamental knowledge of CFML and at least a basic to intermediate level of object-oriented programming. They know what a class and a component is and what inheritance is. They know some of that stuff. And then this one takes it from there and covers how to start using Coldbox. And then, so that one went up, I think about 6 months ago. And just recently, I launched another one on CFcasts that is the video series to watch before the Coldbox series. If you're a long-term CFML developer and are still scared of object-oriented programming, don't understand what a class and a component do, what inheritance and composition are for, how to use basic design patterns, all that stuff that pretty often is the big gap for a lot of long-term CFML developers. We just put that video series together and that went live maybe 2 months ago, something like that. It's up there now. So that's there. It's a self-contained set of videos. You don't have to know what Coldbox is. You don't have to use any particular version of ColdFusion. It'll run on anything current. The demos are all nice and self-contained and easy to follow. And
very cool.
Yeah, so that one's up there now too.
Yeah, so I, that's kind of been when people come to me, because they come to me like, oh, we're trying to train a new dev, or I'm new to this. They just like drop this in my lap. I was a Java developer, right? Usually my path is, okay, go get the cert. You can take the cert or not. It's nice to have. I mean, maybe your company doesn't care and you already have a job, or maybe you're looking for a job. But then I usually recommend them they go to your series. I didn't know you had dropped this thing 2 months ago. I was kind of pointing them towards the Coldbox, but this is actually a nice follow-on actually to the stuff from the Adobe Certified Professional to that. I mean, that would pretty much put you at, like a senior level in terms of your knowledge of how ColdFusion works. Obviously, there's more to it than knowing what a component is, right? But for the future of this, and that was something you and I talked about, I'm still working on that. Let's just put it that way. I am very, very interested in developing, especially in the area of server maintenance and server optimization courses in there, because I feel like that's a really, really huge gap for people. And the people who normally have to take care of that are the people with the least amount of time to learn it. It's usually DevOps folks. It's usually like server admins who, this isn't their only, like they take care of Sharp stuff. They have Windows servers. They have this, they have that, they have VMs. They might have to do some cloud stuff. And if you come into that situation and say, oh, my server's running slow, I'm not really sure why, and whatever, these people are not going to have time to go, oh, well, let me go do a bunch of research and figure out what garbage collection KVM settings I'm supposed to put together, right? Like we had to do that at UC Davis for them, and we had to give them those settings to set up on the servers. But having the ability to send people to training has some value, right? Because if you tell them, if you watch these videos, you'll know, that's much different than, Google it and maybe you'll find out, and you're not really sure whether this will work or not, right? Like that's that. We want people to have the answers and to really know what they're doing. Like sometimes, even for me, I mean, 2 decades of CF, and I still kind of feel I'm on the spaceship twisting knobs, right? like pressing buttons like, oh, what does this do? Oh, it broke the site. Oops, okay, template. Simultaneous templates. Let's put that back up. A fun story. We actually were doing some heavy load testing at UC Davis, and we were doing this because someone higher up than us was blaming ColdFusion for their student information system going down the previous year, which is exceedingly bad. The CIO had missile locks on him, and so we thought, okay, well, let's test it, right? Let's test the whole stack all the way from end to end. And so we went in there and we started hitting this thing with 1,000 simultaneous, right? And at first, it did kind of seem like things were stopping at the ColdFusion server. And we're like, oh, that's funny. What's going on? So we did a little bit of research, looked into it, and it turned out that we were not allowing enough simultaneous templates into the system, right? Like that was creating a little bit of a backup, and they were getting way backed up, and the server was timing out and all that. But the number was like super low. So we said, okay, well, let's tune. We asked a few folks. I think we asked Charlie, and Charlie, gave us some ideas on what we should do it. So we set it to another setting, and suddenly everything started kind of working. So we decided to open them up, like 10,000 or something crazy like that. Yeah, we burned down the database. we basically, literally, they had to hard plug the servers that the database was running on. Essentially, they were in a set of racks at the university because they just had no responsiveness, and they wouldn't come up for like an hour from that. Turns out the database was the limiting factor, not ColdFusion. And
I'm sure the CIO didn't have any plans at all to put missile lock on whatever the database vendor was and delete that, did he?
No, they weren't even going to test that.
Right.
They weren't even. They basically want. It was like it was like a Cardassian trial. You've been found guilty and will be executed, and let's have the trial. So I said, no, I'm not going out like that. And by the way, I'm just a consultant here. I don't work directly for the university, so I'm going to do what I want until you kick me out the door. And so we did that, and they went, oh, well, okay. And then, of course, they went to the Oracle folks on campus like, hey, why is Oracle not doing this? And the Oracle folks were, because it's a database, you guys. Like, you can't, literally dump tens of thousands of requests per second into an Oracle database. There's no way. You'll burn it down, which is what happened. And so they were able to figure it out. And that year, no downtime. It's beautiful. And they're no longer looking at replacing ColdFusion.
It's good to hear that you're addressing the whole tuning and DevOps thing, because you mentioned earlier a lot of the ColdFusion folks don't even know there's a JDK running underneath. And of course, one of the things that's always very disruptive when you change the JDK is all of the tuning changes. The progression from Java 8 to 9, 10, 11, 12 on up, the garbage collectors change pretty much in every release. They change the default every several releases. They make new experimental garbage collectors available. And so pretty much every time you move from one JDK to another, you've got to relearn how you tune the underlying engine. And I mean, we did a lot of work to get things running very, very smoothly. I'm trying to think what JDK we had when we first got set up. This was 10 years ago when I first joined the company I'm at, 6 or 7. And then when we shifted to 8, it changed. And then a whole bunch of changes happened in Java 9, 10, and 11. Some very disruptive changes between 8 and 9. And by the time we moved to 11, the whole GC setup had changed. The whole permgen, all that had changed. So we had to change a lot of stuff. And we already test our entire system, well, as much as we can. We've got some legacy stuff that's locked to JDK 8, but all the rest of it, we test on, we're in production on 11, but we test now on 14, 15, and 16.
That's good. Yeah, getting ahead of the curve.
and so much stuff is changing. I mean, they're actually going to break stuff in 17. They're taking stuff away, which is very
Yay.
rare in the Java world.
Yeah.
And so we were struggling with third-party libraries we were using,
Oh, yeah.
which had essentially been kind of broken by the module stuff in Java 9. And we've been tracking all the reflective access. And when we went from, I think it was when I went from 15 to 16 in my test environment, they've now changed the illegal access flag to tell you that that is going away. And in 17, illegal access overrides will be turned off. And so if you've got anything that's relying on reflective access that you've been getting away with warnings for, that's going to be broken. So the move from 11 to 17 is going to be a big deal for people.
Yeah.
Again, all the JVM stuff is changing. The JVM stuff has changed. I think it changed in 13, it changed a bit in 15, it's changed in 16 again. And I'm pretty sure it's going to change in 17.
And this is really the reasoning behind this type of training, because not only is it a, which boxes to check type of situation in the administrator, this portion of it is literally an open field, right? You're just sending attributes in a string to the JVM to set it up, right? There's not really, you need to know what you're doing. And you can't really, again, like relying on, let's Google this and figure it out. I mean, that's what we ended up doing, and we broke things a lot, but we had time to be able to fix it and optimize it. And of course, we had access to really smart people who could tell us, I think this is what this garbage collection will do in your environment. Because our environment was a little weird too. They had F5, but they didn't do caching properly in it because someone made a mistake once and got scared of caching. And I couldn't convince them that caching done right is okay. So they did first in, last out with sticky sessions, basically. So yeah, that's a different type of access pattern when you're hitting something with thousands and thousands of users than something that's like cached, right? And so garbage collection is different because you're constantly churning through the data that way. So that's one thing I'd love. I'd also I think it would be really great to have a more comprehensive advanced certification that really just kind of went into not just what you're doing, but why, right? And that would touch upon some concepts that are not ColdFusion specific, obviously, right? But it would help certify someone as like a senior developer. I think that would be a really useful, nice thing to have in there. And it also follows the pattern that most certifications, you really have like one cert for a thing, right? Like, if you have AWS certifications, you have multiple levels of AWS certifications on different things. And so I'd like to see that sort of gradated type of thing where someone could have a few different ColdFusion certifications. And then when people are looking for someone to hire, it's more clear that, okay, well, they've gone through and they've certified themselves, so at least we know they know what they're doing, right? And then maybe they have the advanced cert, so they have conceptually good concepts about how the software development lifecycle works, how object-oriented programming is supposed to work, and all that. And then, you roll the dice from there. So there you go. Hopefully that answers that question, Nolan.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about the future of where ColdFusion is going. And I wish I had more to talk about. Something that is probably fairly well known in the community, but I'll mention it in case people are not aware of it. We lost our product owner, our product manager, Rakshith, a while back to Salesforce, which I can't be mad at him. Right? I mean, he got an amazing job with Salesforce as their product owner, right? So, I mean, awesome for him. But in the meantime, we have been searching for someone to replace him and bring them in, and we have not found that person yet. So we haven't hired them. So it's been a bit, and of course, extenuating circumstances. Obviously, COVID in India has been terrible and horrific, right? And we've kind of all lost, coworkers and family of coworkers and all that, and that's been a big effect on being able to search for someone there.
They're meaning that the person that replaces Rakshith has to be based in India?
So this is something that I didn't understand. I believe they have a preference for that person being in India, mostly because the engineering team is largely there, and that they would be working very closely with Shore on the marketing side and the engineering team. I don't know that it was a lock, like they weren't necessarily this person must be in India. They were at first, and that opened up. And then I kind of haven't heard what's been going on since then. I heard there some interviews happened, and almost exclusively when that sort of pattern happens, it was someone internal. And so I believe there was some internal searching in Adobe, which could have been someone US or Europe based possibly, but more than likely was probably someone that was there in India who's currently an internal Adobe employee that they were looking to do. However, that was weeks ago, and I haven't heard any type of thing.
I'm not very surprised by that. I mean, before I actually left Adobe, which I left in 2007, I talked with management about various roles, one of which was product manager for ColdFusion. And the expectation would be that I would probably have to spend 6 months out of the year either on the road or in India, rather than being at home. And that was kind of the deal breaker for me, that it was just too much time away from home. And product evangelist was another role that I discussed, and that also would have involved probably 3 to 6 months of travel, but not so much travel to India. So yeah, I can totally understand why a product manager needs to be at least partly in India, if not totally. You've got to be pretty closely connected to the engineering team. It makes a lot of sense.
It does. Yeah, there's and as the evangelist, I can confirm there's going to be a lot of travel. They haven't tucked me onto a plane yet, but it's coming. There's a lot of talk about where I'm going to be going, and the first trip is probably going to be like a 3-week trip or something. So that'll be fun. So without a product manager in the mix, it's very difficult for me to talk about roadmaps, because really that person is the guiding light or where the roadmap is going. I kind of have a roadmap of where Rakshith had kind of positioned us, but it's nothing you guys have really not heard of. It was further going into the cloud. So we currently have multi-cloud capabilities in 2021. We have a lot of native hooks. The idea was more native hooks, like a lot more access in the multi-cloud environment. Potentially adding Google as the third multi-cloud vendor. So that's definitely been in the mix. Performance increases, of course, right? Language improvements here and there, but really the person who comes in is going to be the one who decides where, I'm sure you've all done the $100 thing where you have $100 and where are you going to put that money, right? So that makes a big difference when you have a 2-year upgrade cycle. Now, are we coming out with CF 2022? I don't know. I actually have not, that has not been answered for me, because we used to be 2016, 2018. It came out kind of in 2020. We called it 2021 because everyone hates 2020. I think it's bad. That's bad juju. It's like calling it ColdFusion 13 or something, right? And so, will there be ColdFusion 2022? Yes. Will everything get into it that we want? I don't know. It's going to depend on who we get and what that person wants to do. I think we can pretty confidently say we're going to continue down the road of where we've been going. So what does that mean? Cloud, serverless, and access to the types of services that are up in the cloud. So cloud-based databases is going to continue to be a focus. We want to make it super easy for people to just hop onto one of the clouds and spin up ColdFusion and just have it run, right? We work with AWS to build out an AMI that I believe, and maybe someone can correct me here, can run on the free tier. Does that get out? I know it was coming, but that was a big deal. That was something that originally, if you went out there and you looked at Coalesce Solutions AMI, you had to run it on their, whatever it was, 5 cents an hour, 5 cents a minute product offering, and there was really no reason for that. It was just what was chosen to be a viable enterprise strength platform to run ColdFusion on. But if I just want to spin it up and see how it does in the cloud, I don't need that, right? It's not necessary. So we worked with Coalesce and AWS to provide the capability to spin up, I think it's like a small one, whatever the free tier, free server level is with that AMI. So you could just get onto there. So that should be there. If it's not, it's like on the way. It's like the Amazon truck is a block from your house kind of thing. It's like right there. Like I know it got approved and all that. It should be there very, very soon if it's not there already. On the Azure side of things, we're working with Azure to do the same kind of thing, but more because we really don't have a plug and play, fire and forget kind of solution with them. They don't work like the same way as AWS does with their AMIs over there. So we actually are working closely with Azure, and we will be the provider of that image. So this is not going to be a third party that's going to generate these types of images, and then you can spin them up and you pay them. It's actually going to be an Adobe product. So you'll go on there and you'll say, I want ColdFusion running in Azure, and you'll choose the server size, and there will be, if you've got a free account, there'll be a free tier, low level, and you'll be able to spin it up on that and use the 30-day free trial of ColdFusion and run it in the cloud for free for 30 days. And don't ask me about Google. We have no idea right now. Someone told me they got ColdFusion running in Google, and when I asked them how they did it, I think they changed the subject. So
yeah. GCP's gotten a lot easier to just spin up arbitrary Java stuff on, but it used to be really, really tricky. The Java environment in Google Cloud was very restricted and had a lot of peculiar system calls and things that you could and couldn't do in certain circumstances. On the cloud stuff, one of the things that I've seen mentioned is AWS Lambda.
Yes.
What's the story with ColdFusion and Lambda?
That's a great question, Sean. The story there is that we have it running in Lambda, and we've had it for a while. And the difficulty that we've had was primarily related to Azure. So we were ready to launch, like when this was going to come out in July, like 19th or 12th or something like that. The plan was the installers would drop on a Monday, and then on Wednesday we'd drop the installers for Lambda. Like it was going to be a couple days after they were going to come out, and I'm not sure why they weren't coming out at the same time, but one depended on the other one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then just chaos and madness, right? So now we've been having to backpedal and deal with that, and so now we're having to recreate them. We had a pre-release a while back. I want to say 6 months ago. We had a pre-release, a very early pre-release in Lambda, where you could run this in Lambda, and it was Oracle based. But it was very early, and there were bugs, and it was a little bit. There was some stability issues. I know Paul Kukio set up a few things using that, and they ran and they were rad.
Okay.
But that was in the pre-release environment, which is now no longer active. Fortunately, his code disappeared, which was like, where's my code? Yeah, I don't know. That was pre-Mark, so I can't even help you with that. So the short answer is we're going to have it. We're going to have ColdFusion in Lambda. It's there. It's sitting there, winging its bat, getting ready to go up to bat. But we need to get these installers in place first and launch those first, and then this will come. It's actually it's a fairly trivial setup to have it move back to the old Oracle installers, because like I said, we had it in Oracle before. Not much has changed in that sort of environment, and so we should be able just to, probably a few days, maybe less, to just get it spun up and thrown out there. The other stuff is less trivial and needs to happen first, and so it's coming very soon. Now, long term, I'm not sure how everything is going to work, because of course Lambda works very differently than a server product.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at, because I mean, even with regular JVM-based solutions, sometimes Lambda is very difficult to work with because of the startup time. And so if your system kind of goes away or goes quiescent, getting it back up and getting it to respond to things, and ColdFusion, I mean, it's been a while since I've actually used it, but it used to take quite a while to get up and get going and start to respond to requests, especially if you've got some big old framework code built with your application. So that I'm curious as to how practical it is.
Yeah, so I can answer that. I can actually answer that question. So the way that we do this, and I think me and Paul are going to actually play on Twitch as soon as this comes out. He talked me into a Twitch crazy session at some ungodly time because he's in Australia.
Yeah. I've been chatting with him on Slack, which is why I was particularly curious about this.
Perfect. Yeah. No, so he's super excited about getting this up there, and so we're gonna play with it. My understanding of how this actually works is, and this is something I've never actually heard ColdFusion working this way, but it's a pre-compile.
Right.
So normally, obviously, we're JIT, right? It first time you hit the page, it compiles, blah blah blah, and then from then on it's super fast, right? Kind of like C# does something. Well, C# does it twice, which is stupid. But anyway, I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? But CF, right? It's just in time. It's kind of your standard Java. For Lambdas, though, you can't do that, right? You can't have it because it needs to be up in milliseconds,
right?
Or
yeah,
portions of a millisecond, right? So my understanding is you would write it, you'd create it, you'd compile it, you'd pre-compile the Lambda, and then push the compiled product up so that when it was requested, there's no pre-compile. There's no, there's no compile. There's no JIT.
Okay.
It's ready, and then it just runs.
So most of the server overhead actually has to get out of the way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's my understanding of the technical aspects of it, and part of what is going into the Lambda release that we're doing is that capability to compile it. There's I think there's a Lambda compiler that you have to run. So you write your code, right? Of course, I think there's limitations on how much can be in there, right? There's limitations on how long it can run because it's Lambda. And then once you're ready, you package it, and that packaging does some of this kind of pre-work to get it ready, and then you put that in, then you push that out, and it's running, and it's available.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Okay, that will be very, very interesting.
I'm looking forward to it. A lot of people are really excited about what they can do with it. And I think it actually, I think you can do like just Java, and I think it works the same way. You need to do a precompile on it because just regular Java in there would have the same problem. I don't know. I thought on like JFrog or something.
You can have a small Java program and it'll spin up the JVM, and that will kind of work. But if you've got a lot of classes, if you've got a lot of initialization, so you've kind of got to be careful of how you structure stuff, and it means you're pretty restricted on what sort of packages you use. So anything that would rely on heavy upfront initialization is completely out the window for Lambda.
Right. And part of using Lambda is knowing, it's the right tool for the job, right? Like it's great for little microservices. It's great for little like one-shot functions. I think Paul actually wrote a CRUD app using like 4 Lambda, which is fun. Yeah, he's fun. So we'll see. And there's some, there's a lot of kind of mystery on how the community is going to use this, right? Because Lambdas are fairly popular. People use them. But when I go to people at companies and say, hey, are you guys currently using Lambdas for anything using other languages? I don't really get a lot of, or if I ask, are you guys going to use it? It's usually like, well, I kind of have to figure out like what it can do. Like they don't really understand what it is that they can do. And similarly, Azure Functions, right? That's the other side of the coin on the other side. I do actually, there's a company that I used to work for that I was telling about this thing, and they showed me an Azure function that they have, which is kind of fun. So they're an insurance company, car insurance, and they have a little SaaS thing. Like let's say Nolan wanted to start awesome vinyl auto insurance, right? But he didn't want to build all the code for it. He just wanted to like sign up for a SaaS platform and white label it and slap his logo on it, which would be awesome. And basically, so this app, if you get in an accident, you have to take a picture and like take a picture of the bumper, or take a picture of the tire and send that in. Well, it turns out people are kind of horrible, and they were sending all kinds of things through it. Terrible things sometimes, and sometimes like pictures of their fridge sometimes, and pictures of other things other times, right? And the problem is, like, a human being has to see that, right? And so there was like sexual harassment potential there, right? For depending on what people were doing. So what they do is when the picture is uploaded, they send it to an AI endpoint. And the AI basically asks, is this a car? Or is this part of a car? Right? It's taught like cars have bumpers, cars have whatever, tires, wheels, doors, windows, grills, right? And it would then return back yes or no. And if it was yes, it's a car, that it would go ahead and go through. If it was like, no, that's, whatever, something bad, then it would throw an error back and it would log it. And then that person might lose their car insurance because they're terrible. So that works great as an Azure function. And that's how they have it set up. So as a Lambda, it would also work really, really well. And this app actually is in ColdFusion partially. So it's interesting that they wrote, and I think it's in C++, I mean. Not sure if it was in C# or in C++, but, because I don't think you can do Azure Functions at all in any way, shape, or form in ColdFusion yet. And maybe that's another thing that we'll look at in the future. If we're going towards the serverless future, which, spoiler alert, we are, that's probably another thing that we're going to very, very heavily look at, is making sure we match across from AWS to Azure so that we get more Azure uptake. That's been a problem. Like, we don't have nearly as many Azure users as we have AWS users.
Well, I'll tell you, hey, I've got a great suggestion. You could compile ColdFusion code to JavaScript and then run it on Node, and that would work really well on a lot of these serverless things.
Wow. I could also compile it to Rust and run it on my RoboVac and have it run me over and over again for having that idea. We could. You know, it'd be great is if we had ColdFusion compiled to JavaScript and then run on the front end, and then maybe we're. Oh wait, no, we tried that worked horribly.
Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
My favorite story is
Sean. It just wouldn't have been a meeting with you here if you hadn't made some comments in that ballpark of things.
So I actually met the developer who was like the lead on, and I don't remember his name now, so I can't even like think back, but and he apologized to me the whole like CF front end, the CF JavaScript thing, like and I was like, no, I mean, it was a good idea. I mean, it was horribly broken, but it was one of those things that like sounds really good if you have it in a meeting, right? And then when you try and actually output it, yeah, not so great.
It won the $100 challenge for a lot of people. I mean, you know, that was why it happened, because a lot of users were like, we want to be able to write front-end apps in ColdFusion. So, you know, I totally see why it happened.
And you know what? We're not the only ones guilty of this. Like Blazor, like these giant monolithic backend app development companies have this feeling like they really want to own both ends of the thing, right? Like, why are you doing that in React? You should be doing that in C# because you know C#. Well, yeah, but C# not great at that. It's good at other things, right? And that's the same thing with ColdFusion. Like ColdFusion is great at data access. It's awesome at like exposing REST endpoints, right? Generating PDFs. It's good at all these things. UI, maybe not so great. You know, and we know it. I mean, we're cognizant of that limitation, and we tried. God help us, we tried, but we don't. You know, I mean, even now when people ask about like, oh, we noticed like CF charts is not working great or whatever. For the most part, I mean, we're like JS charts, guys. Like, yeah. like if the basic charting is not working for you, you gotta like step up or you know, write your own in D3, right? I mean, same with map, and it's really, this is like knowing which tool set to use for your general use case, right? Like map, CF map is a great example of that, right? CF map is absolutely rock star awesome for up to 8 locations, and it breaks horribly past 8. I found that out the hard way. And it's nothing to do with ColdFusion this time, surprisingly, nothing to do with us. So it's the limiting throttle on the Google Maps engine. If you try and send more than 8 per second to it, it flips you the electronic finger and locks you out for all of them. So I was actually developing a mapping app for a group at UC Davis, and it started out great. I was like, this is so awesome. It's like 2 lines of code. I love it. Right? Like, oh man, I'll be done by dinner. And the limited stuff worked great. You know, I put in 1 location, 2 locations, 5 locations. Oh, this is so good. And then I said, okay, I'm going to open it up to the whole database of locations. Loaded a little bit. Like, what's going on? I thought it was ColdFusion. You know, again, bad mark, right? I shouldn't assume. And I did all this research, and finally I was like, oh, it's this. And so if you throttle it, and it's not the actual map rendering. So if you pull down the lat longs, fine. If you are trying to do addresses, that reverse lookup to lat long is the limiter. That's the one that has that has a throttled thing. Yeah. So what we ended up doing, this was like that's a dumb solution, but we wrote a throttle limited lookup table that went through every single address that we had, and if the lat long was blank, it would grab the lat long, sleep for like a second, grab the next one, and fill it in. And then anytime a new one came in as part of the write, it would go and look up just that one and do it, and then it worked. But boy, that was one of those where you're just like smashing your face on the keyboard trying to figure out why is this not working. But I will blame ColdFusion a little bit for that, because it's very black boxy, because it was one line of code. What it's doing, I don't know. It's breaking, right? You go and look in the inspector, and it's like, stupid, crazy Chrome error. This thing is not accessible or out of index or something, and you're like, what does that even mean, right? Like, what's ColdFusion doing? And it's like, no, not them. Having the issue. So yeah, so good stuff there. But that is probably something we won't see a lot of, is like UI toolkits or things of that nature. I think we've learned our lesson very, very well. I think we're going to continue, though, making it easy as possible to expose like REST endpoints and APIs and doing like that kind of thing, that processing. Maybe even a little bit, maybe ease up the like API to API integration type of stuff, right? Like that sort of thing is a total strength of ColdFusion today, and it can be even stronger. And so, again, I'm not that person, right? And they can't make me be that person. I don't want this job. I don't want that job. So yeah, we're if I have a say in it, which I guess I do a little bit, that's going to be the direction that we'll continue to do, because it creates a really great environment, right? You bring your own front end framework to the game, right? Whether it's Ember or Vue or React or Next or 10 billion JS front end frameworks, right? Or even something like HTMX, my favorite. Did anyone here see my talk on HTMX? No. It's awesome. Not the talk. HTMX is super fun. It's a like super lightweight. Calling it a framework is actually not even fair. It's like, it's like adds capability to HTML. It allows you to send verbs from any DOM object and then return them to any other DOM object. So,
Mark, what I heard is you're going to come back and speak for us on HTMX in the near future.
Me? The dude who wrote it is in Stack. I'll do it here. I'll meet you halfway. Me and him will do one together.
We'll talk offline. We'll see.
Definitely. I would love to see him talk again. It's been a while. I think he did a talk for Stack Interactive for you before. I'm trying to remember his name now. I think
I don't honestly know who wrote it. I think we had this discussion before, though, and learned that I was thinking of a different person than you were.
Yeah. It's been so. And
I feel like with my one wisecrack, I've now derailed your entire presentation. Sorry.
All right.
But we've been talking for over an hour. I don't want to keep you all night anyhow. But
no, it's good. Does anyone have any other questions or comments or requests? Or I'm not singing, but not that kind of request. Nolan might.
Probably not today.
Everyone good?
So,
general question: is Adobe the place where products go to die?
Ooh, shots fired.
Oh, ouch. Oh, my heart.
Okay, I as someone who used to work there, I sort of understand where that sentiment comes from, but it's when I was there, one of the things that we had was essentially a worldwide developer conference just for Adobe staff, and so they brought all of the Adobe developers from all around the world to San Jose, and we had a huge developer conference that was internal to the company. And one of the things that they did was they set up an expo where they had every single Adobe product that was available for purchase had essentially its own little display stand. And even back then, I mean, so we're going back to like 2005, 6, 7, somewhere around there. There were 140 active Adobe products being sold. And, you know, I was there, obviously at Macromedia. I was at Macromedia for 6 years. And Macromedia was very aggressive about acquiring companies and then either kind of merging the technology or essentially picking the best ideas out of it and killing it off. In fact, when I interviewed for Macromedia, I interviewed with the LiveMind team. Anyone remember that? Yeah. I interviewed with another team. Gosh, I can't even remember what the name of it was. That was in like startup stage within Macromedia, and it got as far as making some product announcements, and then got killed off. And it was based on technology that the company had acquired. And the company just kept acquiring other companies. And sometimes they got rebadged as Macromedia products, sometimes they got absorbed. And it was the same when Adobe came along. Adobe had a lot of overlap on the desktop suite. And so there was a lot of churn there. So, you know, companies of that size acquire a lot of tech companies, and that kind of means they're going to kill a lot of products. And sometimes they kill their own products, and sometimes they kill the product they've acquired, because you can't realistically, as a single company, have multiple competing products on the shelf. It just doesn't work. So that's kind of my point as an ex-Adobe person. I'll let Mark also chime in on that.
So I'm thinking Dreamweaver and ColdFusion Builder.
I'm still jaded that Fireworks kind of got the axe. I love Fireworks.
I love
that was,
Fireworks. Yeah, I was so sad to see Fireworks.
I wouldn't. So my issue with Adobe and Fireworks is not so much that they killed it. I think the problem for me is they do have a pattern of moving some products to open source, sending them to the Apache Foundation and such. Flex being one of them, PhoneGap being another one. I think the bad decision they made was not putting Fireworks in the Apache Foundation, because it's all JavaScript based. That would have been immediately easy for thousands of developers to pick it up and run with it and build an entire suite of all kinds of fun add-ons for Fireworks. And that would have given Adobe a lot of really easy press in the open source community, but they just instead just sort of let it die on the vine and nothing.
But Nolan, I mean, what, PhoneGap's not around anymore.
That's what that's, I mean, it was another one that kind of got pushed aside.
Like, it's kind of dead, right? So is, and through no, I mean, and that was Apple, I think, killing a very important part of PhoneGap, was the ability to preview your live code on your phone. Once they killed that, I think the interest in using PhoneGap went way down, and they removed, you know, PhoneGap from there. So I think to answer the question, sometimes products go there to die. Obviously not on purpose. I don't think they ever bring them on just because they know they're gonna wood chipper. But what you'll definitely see is this feeling like Adobe wants to make the product theirs. That happened with say Marketo. Recently, it became like Adobe Marketing Suite or something like that. And that came from them absorbing the team, absorbing the product, and really kind of refactoring it into the Adobe mold. So is Marketo dead? Yeah, it's not around anymore, but its child is still there, and it's basically the same product. It's a little bit different. And that happens a bit, and then you get these interesting things. There was a recent acquisition / rebrand on one of their 3D generation toolkits, which I thought was really interesting. Like, they actually had a different product that you could use to do texture painting, but they didn't really have a modeling program that went with it. And so they bought this company that did modeling, which was like supposed to be very easy to use. And then they combined the two products, right? So again, is that product around anymore? Not in its original format. The employees still work here, but now they're combined with this other product, and ostensibly it's a better product, I would hope.
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of joking, obviously, when I say that, but on the other hand, like, you know, I remember ColdFusion in the early 2000s, kind of like the thing. It had kind of a big market share, or at least just in my imagination, it did. It seemed like it did. And then, you know, you kind of wonder, like, where do I see ColdFusion being, you know, are they doing much to actually market it and actually sort of, you know, this direction of sort of building it more into sort of the serverless space makes sense, but where's, you know, then you hear about sort of the you know, the leader for the products has gone, and they haven't been able to replace that person yet. And it's like, you wonder really what is Adobe's commitment to this.
They are very committed to it. Yeah, I can say that with no. So like something that's not very obvious to users outside of Adobe, and wasn't to me, by the way, this was like a shock when I came in, was the ridiculous amount of giant companies and federal and state agencies that use ColdFusion. It's eye-watering. And a lot of them don't necessarily publicly talk about whether they use ColdFusion for whatever reason, whether they don't want to expose the fact that they're using the product because of security concerns or embarrassment. I don't know. Probably the former is probably why they don't do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you know, we make a lot of money on it. Let me just put it that way. We are not hurting. Our market share has continually increased. We make more money this year than we did last year. And we have more clients than we had the year before. What we don't have, though, and this is something I want to change, is we don't have a whole lot of smaller. That's what I like. That's what I want. We have a smaller amount of absolute giants, like industry giants, government giants. I can tell you one company or one group that uses us that blew my mind because someone just publicly announced that they had worked there and worked on ColdFusion a few years ago. And so I can actually say NASA uses ColdFusion.
Yeah, I've taught some of their team how to use object-oriented programming in ColdFusion.
See, there you go.
They've been using it. They use it for a lot of stuff, and it's been around there for a long time.
They've been using it for decades, I think, and they are very dedicated to it. It's not going away. They're bringing in Nolan for training, and this is the same. Like, they're not an outlier. There are tons of very, very large government institutions that basically run the country on ColdFusion, which to me was like, that's awesome. Why aren't you guys putting this on posters, man? Like, this should be driving down the freeway and be like, hey, NASA uses ColdFusion, right? But for whatever reason, and this could be a marketing, thing on our part. It could also be that they just kind of want to be like, hey, we're just a client of yours. Keep it on the, keep it on the down low. Keep it quiet. And so, yeah. And I was worried too. Like, coming into it, I was like, oh no, like, we lost our evangelist and now we lost our product owner. Is this thing? Am I like hopping on a sinking ship, right? And immediately when they started sharing, the internal numbers with me and the sales and who their clients were, it was like, oh, okay, no, that's not a. That's
actually really great to hear.
Yeah,
and I think it's kind of very interesting because ColdFusion's pretty much, ever since it got established, had this very, very strange community where the biggest volume of its users aren't in the quote community, And the community is made up of a lot of people who are either solo ColdFusion developers or in very, very small shops. And so there's this very warped view of what the ColdFusion market actually looks like. And from the ColdFusion community's point of view, it can be really opaque as to why Macromedia and Adobe make decisions, because they're making decisions based on the big numbers and the customers. And the community is a very, very small portion of that and has very often very, very different concerns. And it's why I think there's always been this major clamoring for, ColdFusion should be free, because, we're developers in small companies and we can't afford thousands of dollars for server software. But that's not where the vast majority of ColdFusion market is. I mean, it's always just been one of those weird things.
Yeah, it also makes it exceedingly difficult as someone that, one part of my job is to do community building, right? To bring ColdFusion developers in, just network, to meet each other, or maybe do some, cross training or whatever, right? Like in JavaScript, we all hang out. We go and we have beers, or we go and have tacos together. Like we all just kind of do things together. And some of us work for huge companies. Some of us are solo developers. It really doesn't matter. ColdFusion, though, like Sean said, it's got this very odd thing where it's so many, let's say a vast majority of the developers are 9 to 5. They come into work, they do all their work, they go home. They don't really talk about what they do for good reason, because potentially it's government, it's security, it's finance, it's even university stuff has HIPAA violation and PCI and that sort of stuff, right? And so they can't really talk about what they do for a living, and so you don't get this cross-pollination. You don't get this community building, because these folks just, not saying they're bad programmers, a lot of them are great programmers, but they don't become great programmers in the same way that JavaScript people do, right? By getting together and working on something together and building, things. They do it very solo or within their own group internally, without a lot of, maybe we'll come in, like Adobe will send someone, or Adobe will facilitate sending someone like Nolan to them to help build this like knowledge and improve their programming acumen. But it's like getting up a hill. You can't get up a hill by just pushing the car once. You got to keep doing it. And that pattern, I haven't found it yet in ColdFusion today. It used to exist, right? One of the biggest ColdFusion user groups, the CFUG in Davis, California, which is 5 minutes from my house, was dying. I remember going to one. There was like 100 people there. We had to buy stacks of pizza, right? It was wild, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, the Bay Area CFUG used to be 100+ people. And and in fact, once that moved out of the Adobe building for a while, BackFUG was hosted at somewhere in San Francisco, and it was literally across the street from one of the larger ColdFusion developer pools, which was at I believe at a bank or certainly a finance company.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And not one developer from that finance company crossed the street after work to go to the BackFUG meeting.
I can even
as you
that,
say, it's
Sean.
two different worlds.
The pattern.
I ran the Sacramento CFUG for years, which is what this group morphed out of that when that eventually petered out. We met in the building where about 24 CFML developers worked every day. All they had to do to attend the CFUG meeting was get up and walk about 10 feet to the side where the conference room was. They didn't have to leave the room. They didn't have to cross the street. They didn't have to get up and walk 10 feet that way. And the only person that would come to the meetings was the one guy who was our sponsor, and he would come to unlock the doors and hang out with us. All of the other developers, it's 5:01 p.m. Gotta go. Out.
Yeah.
So what happened to that community then? So where did that go? So what changed?
What happened to?
And like I say,
you used to have these really big groups, and now
Yeah, but you see, it was very much the solo developers or the small company shops, and a lot of those companies disappeared. I mean, I was working at Macromedia when the .com bubble burst, and a huge portion of our small customer base literally vaporized in a 6-month period. And that's kind of happened to CF because the visible community, the user groups we all go to, the people who attend conferences, those aren't the big corporate users in general. So the big corporate users, continue on using it. They have the big company behind the product, Adobe, and they get corporate training and corporate support. But a lot of the solo developers, a lot of the people who are out there in the small shops, it's a very different world, and a lot of those people have moved on. A lot of them have left IT altogether. I mean, there's a lot of people I know who used to be visible in the CF community who've actually left IT altogether. Or they ended up working for a big company. They got a job in some big company that doesn't use CF.
I was going to say that, like, a lot of them went to UC Davis, which has that same kind of, you do your 9 to 5 work. They're one of the largest employers in the Sacramento Davis area of ColdFusion developers, right? There's several groups in there. And the thing that drives me absolutely bonkers as someone that was working there with one of those groups is how little they talk to each other. I had to just drag them by their ears to be like, hey, you guys have the same problems. These guys have solved some of them. These guys have solved some of them. Work together, talk, share ideas, right? Because there isn't that culture of working with the other folks. Everyone is in their own silo there, and it's very frustrating, but it's a very common pattern. And what will happen is a solo ColdFusion developer will work for a small shop. That small shop will go out of business or whatever, and then they'll go to someplace like UC Davis or I think it's another huge development firm in the area. And then they're in that same pattern again. Like maybe they used to go to these meetups to try and get better at what they're doing, or maybe something. And now none of their folks are going there. I was trying to set up. I run my own meetup, which is called StackTech Social, which used to be called Beer.js, but I sort of removed the beer and the JS because it's for everyone, and it's not just beer. You can have sodas and pizza if you want to hang out with us and talk tech. And it's at a pizza place. It's once a month. It's actually next Thursday, I think. And so I would invite all of these folks from UC Davis. Come, join us, right? Bring your CF, learn JS and Python and Azure and all sorts of other stuff from these people. Make friends, get better. Like nobody showed up.
As a Davis person, I can attest to the fact that getting anybody from Davis to cross the causeway is virtually impossible.
Yes, it's like the swamp of despair or something.
Yes, exactly.
They're afraid a tentacle's going to come out and pull their car into the freaking swamp. And I get it. It's a drive. I mean, I get it. It's kind of, especially if it's right after like traffic, like getting across the causeway is some kind of like World of Warcraft,
It's
thing,
brutal,
right? Like it sucks. Yeah, it's and it was fine for a while when COVID was going, but now it's back again and it's super hard. So I get it. That's
all traffic all the time.
All traffic all the time. But that's also, and I don't know, how do we solve that? Right? Like how do we bring more people in? What's funny and great is, so we just had Developer Week, which ostensibly is a ColdFusion event. I mean, we had more than ColdFusion, but it's called Adobe ColdFusion Developer Week. So I'm going to go with that. And we had 3,800 people sign up.
Wow.
Which
Nice.
Which is awesome, right? And
it was all online?
All online, totally free. 3,800 people from around the world signed up. And normally when you have 3,800, you have like, 40, 30% sign up because it's a free thing, right? They didn't pay for it. Maybe half if you're lucky, will show up. That's the pattern that I've seen, right?
Probably more like 25% if you're lucky.
Right, super low, right? Because there's no cost to them for not showing up.
Yeah, yeah.
We had 85% show up.
Well, that's amazing.
We had over 3,000 people show up, and of those, more than 600 watched three talks every single day. That's unheard of. Like I had them recheck those numbers because I didn't believe it. Right, just the 32 whatever 100 showing up is, I mean, almost ludicrous numbers for something like for a tech conference.
Especially online, it's so hard to run a conference online.
Yes, and we had problems with the conference. By the way, I was not happy with the vendor, and we're looking for a new vendor. But even with the problems, people loved it. The feedback that we got was, we love the talks, we love the speakers, and we want more, right? And so that gives me hope, right? That there's that many people worldwide that have an interest in this, that are maybe like looking to get better at ColdFusion or to start ColdFusion. Maybe they were just curious and showed up and went to some of these. And of course, all of our talks were not specifically CS. You know, Ben Nadal talked about feature flag deployments, which you can do using any language. They use Lucy on theirs, but you could do anything with it. We had Raymond Hampton. Ray showed up and talked about Adobe Io, which again, you could talk to that using JavaScript in any language. He actually, I think he tried to do it using the Java JDK and dropping that directly into 2021, and it didn't work. We were talking to our engineering team a lot, because we broke a few things in their JDK when we were trying to use it. But in any case, he had a great talk, loved it. He told me he wants to come to Summit when we have it in person.
I was just going to ask you what the status is of that.
Yeah, so this year it's going to be remote again. And I wish it wasn't, but I'd need a time machine, because we would have had to have known what the status of vaccinations and things like that would have been back in April, I believe, is about the time frame to make it into Vegas. We didn't know what people would even be doing, like whether they'd be interested in going to one of these, right? To an in-person type of thing. And,
yeah, I would argue we still don't know.
Well, currently today, well, as of last week, Las Vegas is at 85% capacity. So
yeah, but it's going to stay that way.
I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. It's hard to tell. So the bottom line is, this year we're going to do Summit virtually again, using a new vendor, and if it's the vendor that I hope it's going to be, that vendor also is developing technology to do hybrid events. And so in the future, we should have the capability to do events that are both online and in person, kind of similar to how, if any of you play video games, if you've ever gone to a BlizzCon, if you've attended BlizzCon, you can pay a small amount to view stuff online. You can choose the channels you want to go to and stream them and view them later, ask questions online. And it's a very, I think BlizzCon charges $29 or something like that. Or you can attend in person and pay the full fee and get swag, and maybe we'll have a swag bag that the people at home can buy if they want a hat, something like that. But it's going to be a little bit of a different thing. I don't think we can completely go away from offering some virtual capability for people to attend this. I think we've just gone too far down that road. And I don't want to. I want these folks. I want these folks who are coming in from places where they can't afford to fly here, or can't get away from work long enough to attend a 3-day conference. Maybe they can only go to 1 day or something like that, but they don't want to spend the money on a flight and a hotel and all that to go to 1 day. Right?
Well, I don't know. Have you heard of the conference Strange Loop
No.
that happens in St. Louis?
No.
It's a multi-tech conference that runs for, I think it's 3 days, and it's like 5 or 7 tracks, and it's all different technology and a lot of leading edge stuff. And it's been going, I want to say it's been going for about a decade now.
Yeah, quite a while.
And I mean, it's a phenomenal conference because, I mean, some of the stuff there will just completely blow your mind. I mean, if you want to be stretched as a developer, it's a great conference to go to. And this year, they're actually going to have it in person. But they just announced that they're also offering virtual tickets. And so if you pay for a virtual ticket, you'll be able to live stream any of the talks, and they're going to have some sort of live interaction for online attendees. Now, what they normally do with that is they usually set up a Slack or something like that so that you have channels for different topics and people can live chat during the event. And so it's going to be an interesting one to see how they manage that. I just, was it last month or the month before, attended a live online conference in Germany. And it was done using Gather Town.
I've heard of this.
Yes. And
How did you like it?
It was fantastic. I mean, the whole experience is kind of like one of those old-fashioned 2D platform games.
Yeah,
you have little avatars and you wander around a map. But one of the things that's great about it and makes it actually work is that you can have little areas that are kind of like private chats. So you can actually go and sit at a table in the virtual world, and anyone else who sits at that table, you automatically get a video conference with the people around the table. So, I mean, I found myself sat at a table with developers from Hong Kong, Sweden, Germany, and somewhere else in America. And, you know, we were able to just sit and chat like you would at a real event. And then, you know, the talk started and you all filter into the auditorium and you go and sit on your little virtual chair. And it has a mode where it switches you over to the speaker. But you can still create a little private bubble where you can talk to your neighbor if you want to have a side chat about the talk while it's happening. And they'd had exhibit booths. You could go and you know, browse through information about products or talk to vendors. It really did kind of feel like a real live event, except, you know, you're a little 2D avatar. So I was very, very impressed with that. And in fact, both myself and my teammate attended it. And of course, from a Californian point of view, it was pretty rough because it started at 1 o'clock in our morning and ran through till 11 o'clock the next day.
Germany, right.
Germany, yeah.
Germany.
But, you know, it really worked. So I think online conferences can work really well. I think hybrid online, offline, online in-person conferences are also a very interesting idea. So I would be fascinated to see what you do with that.
Yeah, if you guys, I should probably start to get going here in a little bit. But one tool that you guys should take a look at, and I was running meetups in this during COVID. It's something called Spatial Chat. So spatial, S-P-A-T-I-A-L .chat, literally, not .com. It's a spatial audio, like a little gathering meeting type app where you can walk around, and it's basically your avatar is your camera in a tiny little thing. And if you move away from other groups, your camera goes away and you turn back into your little icon and your sound goes away. So it really brings that feeling of being in a big room and being able to talk with folks over here, and you have your little group, and then you can walk over that group, and as you walk towards them, you start to hear more of their conversation, and then you go, hey, what's up? You know, so I've been in a little bit, so I started doing some negotiations with them on maybe having it, on having them do a social with us, and it may still happen. I don't know, but it seems like in terms of cost that having a few people is not that bad, and having like just a bit more, the prices just go absolutely through the roof. Like there's like this hyper scaling of the server architecture that happens above about 50 people, somewhere like that, which, you know, like for something like this, for my meetups, I didn't have 50 people. I had 20, maybe 10, right? Like it was not a problem. But with 3,800 developers signing up and 3,000 of them going to actual things, there might be quite a number of rooms with, you know, 50 to 100 people, maybe even more. And the numbers these guys were quoting me, I was like, very high. That's our whole platform that we're doing, and this is like for a party. Yeah, I don't know. So it's still, yeah. We'll see how that goes. I do have to check out GatherTown. I was doing some research. Their prices are also fairly high up, but they do way more. Like Spatial Chat is like a party hangout stuff type of thing. But GatherTown is a full blown. You could do everything in it. You could do your streaming. You could do your talks, all of that stuff. So you do get a little bit more for it. And I wonder if they would be able to work with a different company. Like I'm always a little bit hesitant when you talk about doing streams that they know what they're doing. Because it's super easy to do it for like 100 people. But then when you have, you know, like 1,000 people, suddenly your stuff stops working very quickly. As we found out when we tried to handle it ourselves a couple years ago. You leave it to the professional streamers to do that stuff. Like this guy I know that owns this company that does this stuff. Like these guys do Wimbledon and the Super Bowl, like Tony Hawk, right? Like it's no joke. Like you really need to bring your A game to this stuff. He was explaining his architecture to me one day over hamburgers, and because he's local here, we were just chatting about it, and it's unbelievable the amount of backup you need. Their architecture could take like a tactical nuke, literally. Like it has global failover capabilities. And that's the kind of thing you need when you're talking about thousands of people streaming your stuff. So I was worried, like, oh, those are super cute, but talk about your streaming architecture, shall we? Anyway, awesome. Well, this has been super fun.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, this has been great.
It's been great. It's been really informative. Thank you very much, Mark.
Well, thank you for having me, Nolan. This was super fun, and we can talk offline about having an HTMX.
That'd be awesome. I was joking, but yeah, if you'd like to do it, we'd happily let's chat later about putting something on the calendar. But thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Sean. It's great to see you again. It's been a long time. Thank you, everyone else, for joining. I will get the video edited and thrown on YouTube. Later this summer. Let's say that. We try to spread them out, so like it doesn't do any good for us to do the talk and then put it live the next day. That tends to make people just not attend the talk. So I spread them out a little bit. Perfect. Anyway, thank you again, everyone. I'll see you next time. Have a good night.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, folks. Good night.